He was called Brigadier Charles Arube. At the height of the attempted coup against General Idi Amin on the night of March 23rd and 24th, 1974, Arube was the chief of staff of the Uganda Army. During the month of September of 1973, Charles Arube had proceeded to the Soviet Union for a military course designed specifically for the military high command. His return to Uganda during the month of March 1974 was the source of military tension and an attempt to overthrow General Idi Amin. During his absence, Lieutenant Colonel Hussein Malire was the acting chief of staff. Lieutenant Colonel Malire refused to hand over to Brigadier Arube. Brigadier Charles Arube reported to General Idi Amin, but Hussein Malire simply refused to hand over. Brigadier Charles Arube had taken up the matter with the president on the killings of innocent Ugandans by the military police and the public safety unit. The public safety unit was headed by Mr. Ali Toweli. To give a brief history about Charles Arube, this is what we can say, that he joined the King African Rifles on 12 September 1959. He was recommended to Idi Amin for recruitment by Asa Ate, Amin's mother, who personally handed Charles Arube to him. During that time, Idi Amin was a trainer at the School of Infantry based in the 4th Battalion King African Rifles, which later became 1st Battalion Ugandan Rifles. Arube underwent training at the School of Infantry in Jinja before proceeding to Nanyuki in Kenya for further training. Later, after independence, Arube did a 1-year stint at the Sandhurst Military College. At the time of the coup in Uganda in January 1971, Charles Arube held the rank of captain. He was one of the officers who had attended several meetings in Kampala that was called by Idi Amin to plan a countermove against Dr. Milton Obote's plan to arrest him. Several such meetings took place. During the meeting, Idi Amin informed officers to resist changes in the army leadership structure, in which Idi Amin had been replaced by Brigadier Suleiman Hussein as the army chief of staff. Instead, Amin was made the defense secretary, a post which was ominous and associated with Brigadier Shaban Opolot, who ended up in detention. Charles Arube played a key role in securing the 1st Battalion Ugandan Rifles and the School of Infantry. Other players were Captain Michael Ombia, who was stationed at the signals unit of the Uganda Army. Captain Ombia had just come back from Britain, where he specialized in army signal systems. Captain Ombia ensured that frequencies were changed to favor the Amin loyalists. It should be noted that the barracks in Jinja, where Arube served, had been reinforced by 600 officers who had been deployed from Bamunanika after accusation that Idi Amin had trained a 2,000-man army, mostly from Congo and Sudan. These officers were forcibly redeployed under the supervision of Lieutenant Colonel Ito Jok, who was the army adjutant and quartermaster general. It should be observed that by midnight of 25th January 1971, the redeployed officers had been armed to the teeth and had secured the armory in all the barracks in Uganda. After the coup of 1971, Charles Arube became the commanding officer of the 1st Battalion, Bama Garrison in Jinja. He served for some time before he was transferred to the army headquarters, where he was given the office of the Chief of Staff at the post of a brigadier. It should be noted that there were rapid promotions among Amin loyalists, as there were many vacant posts created after the holders were either eliminated or went into exile. Drama came about when Charles Arube called a meeting at Nakasero Officers' Mess, which was Uganda Club during Obote I leadership. According to eyewitness source, several officers attended the meeting. Among them were Lieutenant Colonel Gala, who commanded the Mountains of the Moon Battalion, Colonel Eli Aseni, who once commanded the Malire Mechanized Unit, Lieutenant Colonel Juma Ali of Malire Mechanized Specialized Reconnaissance Regiment, Major Amin Lomo, commanding officer of the Air and Sea Battalion in Tororo, Captain Stephen Gala, Lieutenant Enoch Maturima, the tank commander of Malire Mechanized Specialized Reconnaissance Regiment. He informed them that Lieutenant Colonel Hussein Malera had refused to hand over the office of Chief of Staff. Charles Arube's fate lay in the hands of the Malire Reconnaissance Unit to overthrow Amin in a similar fashion that Idi Amin had used the unit to spearhead an attack on Dr. Bote's loyalists. The coup plotters identified foreigners in the army whom they accused of killing Ugandans. The officers targeted were Lieutenant Colonel Hussein Malera, a Sudanese in charge of the dreaded military police. Another one was Ali Tawili, in charge of the public safety unit, a killer squad that had replaced the General Service Unit headed by Akena Adoko, a cousin of Dr. Milton Obote. Tawili hailed from Congo. Another targeted was Lieutenant Colonel Mariamungu from Congo, Brigadier Taban Lupayigana, who was the officer in charge of the Marines and who came from Sudan. The Malire Mechanized Unit, armed with tanks and armored cars, attacked and seized key installations in Kampala. They proceeded to surround Amin's command post. Heavy shootings were heard in Kampala. Movements in and out of Kampala were curtailed. A number of officers guarding the command post, which was Amin's fortress, were killed. One school of thought, as given by Captain Baka in the Monitor newspaper, stated that Brigadier Arube insisted on leading the attack force charged with securing Amin's command post with the intention of arresting Idi Amin. Idi Amin mobilized members of the Marines unit, which was based in Bugolobi, a purely mercenary force, to deal with the attacks. The Marines were heavily armed and trained to fight in the city combat. According to eyewitnesses, Amin shot Brigadier Arube from behind the doorway in a room where he was hiding. Arube died from 3 gunshots. After the incident, Amin warned Arube's brother never to reveal what happened. The official statement that was issued stated that Arube had committed suicide. In fact, it was Arube's brother, who was a sergeant in the army, who was forced to read the statement. It should be noted that unlike the military coup in Uganda, where all army units were mobilized to seize key installations and barracks, this was not the case with the attempted coup of 1974. Charles Arube depended more on the Malire Reconnaissance Unit, which Idi Amin had used in 1971. The Arube coup plotters did not take into consideration that Idi Amin had recruited tens of thousands of soldiers shortly after the coup and equipped them with modern weapons. For example, the heavily armed artillery battalion based in Masindi refused to participate in the coup. The battalion was headed by Lieutenant Colonel Kisule. Kisule proceeded to inform Idi Amin. Brigadier Lopayegani of the Marines unit quickly mobilized his soldiers to move into the city to contain the Malire Reconnaissance Unit. They quickly broke the cordon around Amin's command post and were able to secure the city. Lieutenant Colonel Aseni and other coup plotters were supposed to be court-martialed, but this was dropped at the last minute due to complaints by the army. After the incident, President Idi Amin ordered the Malire mechanized unit to move to a new barracks in Bombo. He had given instructions that they do not leave with the equipment such as tanks and armored personnel carriers and army jeeps. They, however, refused the orders and carried their heavy equipment. If the history of the Uganda Army will be written, Malire mechanized unit would be remembered as a unit which brought Idi Amin to power, attempted to overthrow him, and also failed him during the war with Tanzania in 1979, in which Amin was overthrown. The attempted coup brought tension between military forces in Uganda. It created lasting division between Malire Regiment, now based in Bombo, and the Marines at Bugolobi. During the 1979 war between Uganda and Tanzania, the Marines refused to fight in the war, which was caused by the Malire Regiment, and instead the unit moved to southern Sudan with all their equipment.